Tennessee. I'll tell you a little more about that later. First off, I'd like to thank Steve Gill for closing for me tonight. About 24 hours ago, there was a website that posted a hit piece on me, and it discussed how I was extreme. In fact, the website itself was the Democrat Party of Rutherford County. Now, I was surprised by this because I really didn't know there was a Democrat Party down here in Rutherford County. It really was shocking. Now, they called me extreme. They called me extreme, and let's talk about that for a quick second. As Ken said, the Declaration of Independence discusses life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's part of it. The other part is that you have the right and even the duty to overthrow, abolish, or succeed from any government that is oppressive to those ends. Now, is that extreme?
Yeah! No!
Is quoting the founding fathers, the founding documents of this country extreme? I don't know. I'm just saying. Now, Barry Goldwater, said that extremism in the defense of liberty is no vice. Okay. Am I extreme? I don't know. I'll let you decide for yourself. I'd like to educate some people here for just a few minutes, and we're going to talk about a couple of things. Right now, what we're seeing in this American Renaissance is constitutionalism and a flavor of libertarianism. And both are very similar. In fact, in today's era, they might as well be the same because they have the same goals: limiting the government. And our rights do not exist because the government gives them to us. Our rights do not exist because the community grants us our rights. Our rights exist because we are individual human beings, and we are born with those rights, and they are inalienable. Now, our rights cannot be taken away unless we infringe upon the rights of others. Our rights cannot be taken away unless there is due process of law, meaning that we are convicted in a court of law by a jury of our peers. Some people believe, as do I, that our humanity, which is what gives us our rights, is a gift from God. Now, the important thing is, though, that you do not have to believe in a higher power to acknowledge that we have individual rights regardless. All rights are derived from property. In fact, I was actually surprised he's not there now, but Ken mentioned this a few minutes ago. All rights are derived from property. Now, I don't necessarily mean land, although land is property. I mean your body. Does anybody else think that they don't own their own body? Probably not. Your possessions, your house, your car, that's your property. And you have to be able to do what you want with your own property. And if you cannot do what you want with your own property, then the question becomes, do you really have any rights? Okay? Now, I'm going to challenge you here in a few minutes, and it may make you a little uncomfortable, but it's going to get you to think, hopefully. Now, if you own land, you can tell somebody, your neighbor, that they can walk back and forth your land. You're giving them the privilege of walking in back and forth of your land. Now, if you wake up one day and you're in a bad mood and you don't like the neighbor anymore, you can tell them, stop walking on my land, and they have to stop because it's not their land, it's your land. You own it, okay? You have the right to do that, and you can dole out privileges. There are a couple of things you must take away tonight. The first one is rights and privileges are opposites. Let me say that again. Rights and privileges are opposites. Rights are inherent, privileges are given out. Now, you've probably all heard the phrase, driving is not a right, it's a privilege. Okay? So then you have to ask yourself, well, if it's a privilege, I have to ask permission, right? Well, of course. Now, the Second Amendment, well, let me start with the First Amendment. I'm speaking up here today. I did not have to get permission from the government. I did not have to ask permission to speak. I did not have to ask permission to blog. I don't have to ask permission to promote my ideas on a website, to write in a newspaper. I don't have to ask permission from the government because our government, for the most part, acknowledges that we have these fundamental and natural rights. Now, what I'd like to pose to you is that I bet many of you in here, out here, own firearms, okay? Carrying firearms. Now, I also bet many of you probably asked permission from the government before you purchased those firearms. Now, the logical conclusion is, if you have to ask permission, it's a privilege. It's not a right. I don't agree with that. So, whenever the government licenses something, whenever the government says you have to get our permission before you do that, it's not a right, it's a privilege. And that ought to make you mad as hell. You'll go home this week and you're going to think about that, hopefully, and it's going to brew inside, and you're going to realize you don't own as much as you think you own. You don't have as many rights as you think you have. If somebody wants to try an herb because they're sick, you know, if it hasn't been approved by the FDA, they're not allowed to. They're not allowed to put something in their body that they don't necessarily, that the government hasn't given them permission to do so. The government has not granted the privilege of you to be able to do that. So if you can't do with your own body what you want, do you really own your own body? Just questions to ask. Now, rights and to go back, rights and privileges are opposites. You must keep that in mind. The second point is that rights and responsibilities are in tandem. I have the right to defend myself. I have the right to carry a firearm, but I have the responsibility to ensure that's not misused. I have a right to free speech, but I have a responsibility to ensure that I don't speak ill of anybody in an unjust manner, that I don't yell fire in a crowded theater. So rights and responsibilities are in tandem. And those are the two things that are really important. Only individuals have rights. Communities don't have rights. You don't have rights because you were born into a certain family. You don't have rights because you have a certain skin color. You don't have rights because you happen to be of a particular political or whatever persuasion. You only have rights because you are an individual human being. Okay? Now, keep that in mind. The Constitution, which I'm sure most of you are fairly educated on, has roughly, depending on how you count, between 18 and 21 points that it authorizes the federal government to act on. And coupled with the 10th Amendment, nothing outside of that is constitutional, okay? Now, what's interesting is, and I challenge all of you to do this, the Shrieker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, went out one day and was walking through the halls of Congress, and somebody approached her in a very humble and polite manner and said, "Madam, where in the Constitution is health care authorized?" And she laughed. And the guy stood there, and she said, "Oh, are you serious?" And turned around and walked away. What the hell kind of government is that? These people are out of control, and we have elections coming up. And a lot of people are going to be asking for your support. They're going to be asking for your vote. A lot of them are incumbents. And this is where the price of liberty is eternal vigilance. It is incumbent upon you not to just listen to what these people are saying. You have to go and look at their voting record. And the criteria that I use, well, let me tell you a quick story. I was sitting down having dinner with a state senator one night, and this particular state senator said, "Matt, we run into a situation where we don't get a lot of feedback on the bills from our constituents. And we have a red light and a green light, yay and nay. Nay and yay, red is nay, green is yay. I think it should be backwards, but that's just me." And he says, "We have about 20 seconds to decide to vote yes or no on a bill. And a lot of times, if we don't have any feedback from our constituents on which way to vote, just vote yes." And I wanted to kind of launch across the table and strangle him, but I thought better of it. And I said, "Well, Senator, why don't you consider the following, if I may offer." And he was buying me dinner, so he was interested in my opinion. And I said, "Please take the following 3 points and consider these before you vote on any legislation. First of all, does it increase the size or the scope of government? Second of all, does it increase taxes or spending? And third of all, is it contrary to either the state or the federal constitution? And if the answer to any of those three is yes, then vote no." Now, hang on. His response to me was, "Wow, that's a good idea. I hadn't thought of that." So it is incumbent upon us to hold our elected officials accountable, because if we don't, they're going to go off and do whatever they think is best, whether it's, but really the fundamental thing is they have to adhere to the U.S. Constitution, because if they don't, then, or the federal Constitution, because if they don't, then we're going to get more of the same. Now, people who are running, ask them those 3 questions. people who do not have a voting record say, look, are you going to vote to increase the size or scope of government? Are you going to raise taxes or spending? Are you going to do anything contrary to the Constitution? And you're taking a chance, admittedly, but just be wary of that. A lot of people who run for office are going to try and appeal to you through your senses. For example, and I'm not necessarily knocking any of these people, but Mitt Romney is going to appeal because he's good looking. Mike Huckabee is going to appeal because he's of his faith. John McCain is going to appeal because he's using the patriotic button. Sarah Palin is going to appeal on the Americana wavelength. So that's not important, though. None of that's important. What's important is how have they voted? Can you trust them? Are they actually going to limit government when they're supposed to? And it is incumbent upon us to keep all of that in mind. And I'm not a complete idealist. I realize that there is some compromise necessary in politics, but my idea of compromise is, should we limit the budget by 98% or 99%? And that's just me. Write it down on my palm, that's good. Now, all right, the hook is coming out, so I have to get off here. A couple of points. We are not going to win this through electoral victory. We have to do it through education. We have to change the hearts and minds of our fellow citizens. If we don't, it doesn't matter who we send to the elected offices, it's not going to do any good. We get the government that the people in this country deserve, and we have to do better. That's just all there is to it. If you are interested, and we have a duopoly, we have a two-party system, we have to work within the two-party system because we don't have a choice at the moment. That may change. I'm all for competition in the voting booth, but as it stands right now, you have to work through the two-party system if you're going to accomplish anything. And if you are interested in working within the Republican Party, there's an organization called the Republican Liberty Caucus. I'm the vice chair of Tennessee, and they are trying to change the Republican Party from within. Their idea is getting like-minded, limited government type of individuals. We're having a caucus on the 24th in Saudi Daisy. If any of you are interested in becoming an officer, you're more than welcome to attend. We'd love to have you. Also, check out the Campaign for Liberty booth off to my right. They're a nonpartisan organization and advocate education and limited constitutional government. One other thing I promised to do. The gentleman with the Tennessee flag out there, his name is Rich Hamblin. Some of y'all may have heard of him. He went to jail. He was an officer in the State Guard, and he spent 13 months in a federal pen because apparently the Second Amendment does not apply in Tennessee, but he can tell you more about that. He's got a case in front of the Supreme Court right now. Also, if any of you would like to hang out with the Campaign for Liberty or me or any of the rest of us, we're going to a place called Bobby McKee's off of Old Fort Parkway, just next to Olive Garden, as soon as this evening concludes. Thank you for listening. I appreciate the time, and I hope you'll have a good evening.